Because I joined a little bit late, and so I can't see it.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
Okay, so in matters of old business, perfect timing, Marcin. This first item on the agenda is Michael with policy. I think you can probably talk about your new policy idea, and then we can hand it off to Marcin for governance policy updates.
This will be very short. So I guess we've been starting to try and get people to do some of the stuff we're suggesting from a communications point of view. So Christian and I actually set up some matrix channels and started encouraging some people to use them, which threw up lots of issues, which is great. So one was just that actually, we've discussed quite a bit why this is maybe desirable, but I don't think it's not totally obvious to other people. So we have a communications problem. So we've written down the plan, but we don't necessarily have enough of the reasoning. So I actually have written I guess I should share it with you all as well, if you like. I just wrote down, after having this conversation a couple of times, I just wrote down my sort of pitch for why I think, wait, is that the correct link? Yes. My attempt at a pitch for why people in the Cardano project should be keen on moving to open communication, which maybe, I don't know, maybe that should go and live somewhere else, but I'm trying to sort of do the politics and encourage people in that direction. That's about it. The other thing that raised was just that one thing that people were worried about was, well, look, if we're going to be having communication with the public, how do we deal with people being a pain? What if someone just comes in and wastes all the time asking stupid questions or something? And I think while we have a code of conduct, which is great, so I think for people doing actively bad stuff, that's fine. But I think we maybe need some kind of guidelines that relate to the purpose of some of these channels. We want to be able to say this is a channel for the contributors to the project to talk about the project. If you are interfering with their ability to do that, they should be allowed to kick you. It's not sort of a judgment on you as a person, but that's otherwise the thing won't be fit for purpose. So I don't know. We maybe need to come up with some kind of guidelines like that, and it might just be a case of writing a few down, but also could do a bit of research and see if I bet existing software foundations and so on probably have guidelines like this, so we can try and steal something. That's about it, and nothing has really happened with regards to security. I just need to actually set up some meetings with people to talk about that. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's for me.
If you want, I can do admin and set up a couple of those security policy calls. Go ahead, Solana.
Hi. Hi, I'm Solana. Christian knows who I am. I think Michael does, but I don't think the rest of y'all do. I'm here to help on a bunch of different stuff. I'm a subject matter expert in open source. I've been doing it for over 20 years. I've helped several companies go from proprietary to open source and things of that nature. And so when you mention other groups have done this, and there's probably copies of it somewhere, I got lots of copies, and I'm basically here to help. Tan's kind of hired me to we've been working on all these best practices and standards. In fact, there's something called the OSGov that's been just launched with the Eclipse Foundation for doing a standards for open source governance. And so I have all that material that I've been gathering up and getting ready, and I want to share. And so if there's any way for me to help y'all or do anything along those lines, please, please, please let me know, and I will pop the different stuff up for you.
That sounds fantastic. I would love to just see whatever you've got. I mean, we've been doing this on a sort of ad hoc basis. Like the Eclipse Foundation that has a lot of good stuff. I've been looking at their stuff and so on. Some of the software foundations, but if you've been doing that systematically, that sounds really helpful. So I would love to see what you've got.
Totally systematically. I've been working with a lot of different groups in regards to it. For the Eclipse stuff, that's just where we found a home to work on the standard, because we do actually want to go for an ISO standard in regards to it, so that we can start badging and doing things in regards to Tam, of course, likes the idea of an openness index, so that we can sit there and go, oh, yes, okay, you're going through all of these different stages of integrating with the community and such. And so we're doing that to try to help with the ecosystem in general. But similar to the EDI stuff, but this is how do I help with Intersect to be doing all the different open source stuff. So, and if y'all want to, you can just Google me and see what I've been up to.
It's perfect. If you'll have the availability, I'll include you and stuff. I just wanted that proper intro for you first.
Sure.
And we got a big month of March ahead of us with the strategy and everything else. So you're invaluable.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and do some admin stuff on connecting the security things, Michael, in case you're booked already.
Yeah, I mean, I can follow up on that because like I think we just need to work out a short list of people who care.
I had 4 people written down already. I'll Slack them to you.
Okay.
Okay. Marcin, didn't know if you had any other comments about the network working group.
Not yet, really. We scheduled the first meeting, which will be, or I don't remember. But it will be like in 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah,
I
March 11th.
I can share a link to the event later.
Okay. And that will help us get participation, and we'll see how it goes, take notes, and then I think towards the end of March, we're going to start expanding it to starting up the other working groups as well.
Yeah, I think we will need some help from you to actually advertise it somewhere in the community.
Okay, I'll do that. We probably need to resync again with Ryan and Matt anyway, just to do a current progress update for the working group pilot. Okay, so that's that. Next update is going to be from Gheorge on the OSPO workflow and the work that he's been doing. And you're good to go. We got the green lights on the deck, so you're good to share, Gheorge.
Okay. I hope, sure. I hope you see my screen. It takes a little. Okay, to be sure. So we are in the week 9 and project week 5 for me and Bogdan. We are covering the 2 positions from the 5-3 initially under the head of OSPO, which is Christian. Our Q1 governance and foundation objectives are written with red, and we split it with Bogdan in 2 parts. The first one, all the time you see the author and the guy who makes the review and the QA. So the first point is about OSPO governance model and structure. As you can see with green, it's what we already succeed to do. With orange is the actual status in progress, and with red is what will follow. The second one is about developing open source strategy and policies. This is Bogdan as author and me as reviewer. At this moment, it's in the validation phase, the first draft created by Bogdan. Then we are speaking about functional reporting areas for delivery assurance. We are in the phase to finish the initial draft document. And the GitHub audit for policy alignment is the 4th one. Here we are in the general place the picture in the frame. And here is Christian Taylor, the one that installed a new tool to be able to create really nice statistics about and real-time statistics about the status of all our repositories. Here we are with our objectives. Thank you very much for your patience. I want also to take a little bit detailed view about what have we done. So I'll speak about my 2 points about OSPO governance model and structure and functional reporting areas for delivery assurance. Here are the OSPO responsibilities, and I underlined 2 of them to show that these 2 objectives are mapped over the OSPO responsibilities identified in the roadmap. Here you can see them underlined with red. And here is about the first one. Yes, Michael, please.
Sorry, just checking. Going back to slide, you say you're worried about the OSPO governance. Is this talking about how it fits into Intersect as a whole? So
Yes,
trying to sort out
yes.
the big diagram that we're about to look at. Okay, that's
Thank you very much,
because
Michael.
I was like,
for
in
the
my head, I'm
question.
like, how does the OSPO work?
It's-
Surely it's not that complicated,
I
right?
have to
Gonna be
confess
talking
you,
about
in the first moment when I read, I said, okay, OSPO is one, open source, it's something different. Intersect, it's something else, and Cardano, it's completely the biggest image. So that's why I decided to speak about OSPO to show where OSPO is positioned at this moment, then to show where exactly in the open source story and Intersect functioning its position today, and then in the final image, I showed where is positioned in the big Cardano image, in the diagram. I created the diagram. Yes, Silona, please.
I think I have a very similar question in regards to that, where
Yes,
it's kind of so normally you have like an open source project and then you have OSPOs, and OSPOs are often offices contained within another entity that isn't open source, like
exactly.
a university or a business or something along those lines. It's very rare to have an open source project contain an OSPO. And so it seems a little bit strange to me, because it's normally like you have, like, for example, even GitLab, which is technically a business. They are an open source company, so therefore they don't actually have an OSPO because they're automatically an open source company, and they've integrated everything into their operating procedures as a business so that they can be as open as possible. And that's why GitLab doesn't get into trouble like GitHub does with a lot of the open source community, because of the fact of how open and integrated they are on that. And so I'm trying to like noodle some of these pieces out, because a lot of times the governance, especially on an open source project, ends up very much so having to be integrated because of how budgeting decisions are made and all of those other different things are made. Like if you have a membership driven organization like GNOME, for example, where the members are, at a high level making product style of decisions, and then you have the other maintainers syncing up with that level. Otherwise you can get a split that happens between product and special interests, and where users need things to go, and and what the developers are willing and wanting to do. And you have to be careful not to create that kind of wedge. So I was just kind of trying to figure out the definitions that you were just talking about. Is there a way that we could start doing a glossary as to which each of the things are? Because having an OSC and then having an OSPO and then having Intersect, the MBO, and I think that's going to get one of the things that I said during the workshop in
Yes,
London is you have to be
it's
careful, because when you aren't clear, people
yeah.
assume bad things. And I'm already seeing a little bit of that happening on some of the forums. And so how do we get in front of that? So
Yeah,
thanks.
to help, we can build a glossary on that, because the OSPO Intersect is kind of a reduced scope when you compare it to other foundations. Because when you tie in delivery assurance, it's kind of like we're outsourcing a lot of traditional OSPO functions to the wider of Intersect. So it's a complicated helping define where the OSPO sits in all of this, but we do have some general idea of where we're going, and that's where Gheorge and them are helping us discover the other facets to that. because you're probably familiar with Hart Montgomery and such, and he's someone who I'd talked to around this and when we were formulating it as well.
Yeah, I know Hart. I used to have his role.
Oh, okay. But I would love to tie you into this conversation as well, Silona.
So yeah, so a lot of the different constructs that are created, I created. So yes,
I see.
but I do think it's dangerous optically speaking, is what I'm trying to say here. To sit there and say that you have all those different ones, and everyone has to go and figure out where those different things are and who's in control of what and things of that nature, and it causes a lot of confusion. One of the things I have to admit, I'm currently really in love with GitLab's handbook, because they publicize their employee handbook, and it's the same handbook for the community as well. And there's no lack of clarity in regards to how GitHub is going to engage with you at all. Everybody knows, go there. Oh, the employees are acting the same way. Oh, the employees have a set number of things that they have to take from the community and integrate with the community. And so they're really metrics driven on that, and it helps out a lot. And so I'm just saying, be careful with these constructs, because it's looking a lot more involved than it possibly should be for your audience at hand. Sorry, thanks.
Thank you very much, Silona. Michael,
I just wanted to.
you raised the hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something briefly. First of all, I also love GitLab's handbook first approach, and I would love us to also have such a good culture of writing as well. I do one thing I think I'm hoping that we can take from that kind of attitude, and that I've been trying to push a bit, is to try and just make it as much as possible that the sort of the interface that the our Intersect open source projects present is as much as possible sort of agnostic to whether or not you work for anyone or whether you have a contract with Intersect or anything like that. And so they can really just be viewed standalone as well-governed open source projects, and not have this sort of sticky, try and as much as possible avoid this kind of sticky connection to Intersect as a grant-giving body and the optical perceptions around that. But also I think that's something we'll definitely talk about more.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so happy you are recording the meeting. Thank you, Silona. I will review everything because it's really, really precious. I have to tell you that already we spoke and are very carefully to introduce all the definitions. When we are using a term, we already push in also the definition for this concept that we are specifying. Thank you very much once again. So here is the initial schema where we can identify the 2 points that we are spoke for in the open source program office is the model and structure, and also the reporting areas, which is the collaboration with delivery assurance, because there are reporting areas for the delivery assurance. This is a big picture about how today everything is functioning. As you can see, these are the big boxes. I try to keep it under 12, following the advice of our Hoggerty colleague. And as you can see here, we have the big boxes that are today in a detailed diagram that I will present you. The first one is the Cardano community, which will be the center of the universe for the whole story. We have then, and I name it just temporary, we can change the name, a Cardano Welcome Department. Into this Cardano Welcome Department are the steps suggested by Charles Hoskinson to train the people, to certify them, to make them available to enter in the new team. Also in the same yellow box, it's a process to integrate directly projects with a possible defined small or biggest team. Of course, there are a lot of questions in this integration at this moment. As example, how will be integrated an existing team based on real working contracts, not on activity made based on your own passion to do something in the open source, how these teams will be integrated in the old projects, how a new project will stay aligned with the old projects in the open source. Then we'll have the Cardano governance, which is normally the one that should control, validate, especially they should validate through the steering committee, the special steering committees, the enter into the Cardano backlog. And I put it here, backlogs, because you will see in detail, we speak about 3 types of backlogs. Then we'll have Cardano projects, open source projects, where we have project management committees and working groups. All of these are made to deliver something into the Cardano repositories. Yes, Adam, please.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify what we mean when we're talking about Cardano governance here, because I
Yeah.
don't see a way that SIP 1694 has any control over what goes in or out of the backlogs. Are we talking about some sort of a social consensus layer that's going to stand between the community and the steering committees, or are we talking about something different? We throw governance around a ton, and we already have 2 different voting things that use the same terms. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. What do we mean when we're talking about governance?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adam. If you have just a little patience, I will go into a detailed design, this one. And here we can see what is with purple, the governance board and everything. Please, yes, Silona, if someone raised already the hand, sorry if I didn't saw. So I will go in the detailed schema, and I hope I have many other details that are all of them possible to be changed. That's why, Adam, thank you very much with anticipation. Thank you, Silona, because we want to make the better design for what we are doing now. Give me just a second, if you agree, Silona. Otherwise, please ask. I want to put the detailed schema in my.
I was actually going to answer Adam.
Okay. Thank you very much for your help. It's huge. Thank you very much. So please.
So Adam, I don't know if you heard that we had like the civics community and some others gathered to have a workshop in London with TAM. And we actually went over some workflows that we hope to be publishing very, very soon in regards to product backlog and vision backlog. And that's why I was sitting there saying, be careful about driving a wedge, because we're looking at how do we make these processes integrated so that they can come over. And it was pretty cool because we had Chris there from Catalyst. And so I'm like, can we steal some tools from Catalyst? And because they're open sourcing it as well. They're like, yes, that would be great. And so we were actually going through on the civics one as to how do we do those integrations. And we had some of the CF people there too. And I was sitting there going, well, this is a place where SIP could come in. This is a place where this could come in. And so we kind of started ideating on some possible workflows in regards to that. And I hope we'll be able to publish some of that soon. So we are thinking that direction. People are Nigel was there, Lawrence was there. And so we are like trying to figure out those pieces and trying to do it with the community at large. First was smaller, but we're like trying to figure out how we're going to publish this. And this, sorry to sideline, but we kind of sat there and said, oh shit, we need a collaborative tool for like that diagram that you've got there. And then like all the Miro boards and all the other different ones. It's like, can we like start collaborating on this a little bit better? But none of the tools really let us. And so they were like, okay, Selena, you're going to submit that tool to Catalyst now. And I'm just like, okay. But yeah.
Briefly to jump in, just because we got to stop this at the half hour. Michael, I'll let you speak in a second, but we'll continue this conversation next week, George. We'll do a half-hour session on it as well to go into the details. But this is all stemmed out from us discovering where does OSPO fit in the picture. And then we found out there's broader conversations going everywhere, so we're keeping it very centralized to that and just trying to map everything else that's going on. And glad to know that y'all were doing that, Solona, because we had no idea. So,
Well, and it's like I said, it's hard to like bring it out there too, right? Like, so we're trying to figure out like, how do we bring this out there and how do we bring this to each of these different groups? And so Tam's just like, why don't you just go sit in on all of them and like try to help coalesce these things together more? So that's kind of like what I'm supposed to be like secretly doing, is finding out what y'all are doing, finding out what the other group is doing, finding out and going, hey, y'all look at this. And so I'm kind of like, you know, a spy. No, not a spy.
well, I think we
The
were
most
joking on
transparent spy you've ever seen.
well, I think we were joking on one of the chats about starting a Cardano syndicate of some kind. So,
Well, one of the things at the workshop, they're like, what do you want at the end of this thing? And I was like, I know I'm not going to get it, but I would like an ecosystem-wide communication plan so that we can all know what each other are doing and we can integrate these things better and we can know, you know, what's happening. Because it's just tough to like me coming in as an outsider. Okay, yeah, I owe 23,000, you know, ADA, but I didn't know any of this stuff until I came in and started working with Tam and Charles. I was just like, I had no idea that all this stuff existed. And so it's just like, how do we, you know, get that all out there for everyone to know and get more
Absolutely.
people out of the open source community?
go ahead, Michael, before we
I'll
have to
try and be
transition.
brief. This was just for Adam. So I do think that this governance stuff does link up to when we were talking about governance of how the individual projects are going to be governed, which is that this is why they have to have this connection, this accountability upwards to Intersect as a body, because that's the lever that's the connection through which we eventually get connected up into what's coming from the community through SIP 1694 or whatever, and we have to have that connection there so that can be transmitted. So that's kind of the linkage. That's it.
And
Yeah,
don't
where
forget
do
about the
the
money, Adam. Don't forget about the approval of money. at the end.
absolutely everything we're doing here, right? It's all going to come down to whether or not
That's right.
the community votes to fund us from the treasury. Thanks. Yeah, Christian, I was just going to ask where the Miro is, because that's, you know, the other big piece that's currently
Yes.
missing.
Sorry,
Man.
I cannot share. I don't have the permission to share the link.
Yeah.
That's why. Thank you once again, Christian. You are doing.
I'll put it in the
Silona,
Discord.
Any
and everything.
change you propose, we'll take it. Thank you.
And to answer everyone's question, Sandip is the one who approves all the money. So, just kidding. No, I figured I'd do that to introduce him with the strategy introduction for Bogdan. So, whenever you're ready, Sandip.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to approve the treasury funding. Right. Thank you for the introduction. The next thing is about the strategy. For that, the basis is this document. Let me share that on the chat. The starting notes based on the interviews. And we have received a draft yesterday from Bogdan and Gheorge. So the links are here. I have gone through the document. I have some comments as well. I have also seen Michael comment. So it is a starting draft, and we have several things that we need to go through and discuss and refine. So far, I like the structure, but the content and the specific points, I think there are many things we need to refine. That's my feedback on it. And I would like to introduce Bogdan, who is going to explain more on the document structure and the steps in it.
Yeah, thank you, Sandip. Okay, few words before sharing the screen. So when I was, let's say, tasked with the task of building a strategy, I was thinking, oh my God, but I don't know anything about this organization. So for anyone to know, Gheorge and I were onboarded like 4 weeks ago. And my first thought was strategy itself, to define the strategy itself, needs on top of that a strategy to build a strategy. How I'm going to build a strategy? What should I have on my table in order to be able to put all the puzzle pieces together? So this was the moment when I was thinking, that first step won't be to create action items, won't be to create goals, won't be to select strategic areas. The first step for me will be to observe, to understand, and then to define a model, like building a house. So planning the house, building the house, and then at the end, put the content inside, or the furniture inside. So this is the introduction. And now sharing the screen just to show you some highlights. One thing, Michael, thank you very much. I saw your comments. I have to admit that I went through them quite quickly. I will spend a bit more time today to respond where is the case. And also I have seen something coming from Sandip. And for anyone else, I will share the screen to show you what is this strategy in big terms. Okay, so what I was feeling the need is the strategy for strategy. So I had a reflection time. Then the second thing was to set a terminology, at least for myself. And then this terminology, for sure, I would say it's important to be communicated with everyone because words are important. And as an example, how we distinguish between an action item and an objective. Are we going to call this objective or goal? So having this terminology is important. Good. Okay, so what actually a strategy is? I have seen in the past many times people thinking about the strategy, but actually writing down actions. So I would say that was important to state from the beginning that the strategy is something that sits somewhere under 100,000 feet, somewhere in the sky, and give us an overarching perspective about the ground where we want to move forward effectively. And also any strategy, any feature or any initiative should have a strategy, and this explains what and why we are doing what we are doing. Some characteristics here, I will not spend too much time on them. Then another thing was what a strategy is not. So a strategy, in my opinion, is not about the small house. And generally speaking, a strategy ends where the small house starts. Also, open source strategy is not the Cardano strategy. Cardano strategy is completely different thing that sits above the open source strategy. And for that reason, open source strategy emerges, is somehow results from the Cardano strategy. When I was writing down different things in the big document that was shared with you, I had all the time in my mind this question: which are actually the Cardano strategy? I have watched some videos for sure, but I wasn't able to identify somewhere a kind of a document. Maybe is somewhere, but will help me a lot in defining this and nailing down this open source strategy. Some differentiators between strategy and tactics. These key elements were mentioned. This metaphor analogy with the house, all the time when we start to build the house, we start with the foundation. This foundation is mission and vision. So don't start in here on the top, as many people do, with actions, with plans, tools, processes. For sure, we are, as humans, we are biased to the action, but then we have to stop a bit and return to what is important to this foundation, mission and vision, and then identifying some strategic areas or strategic bets or levers or opportunity spaces, we can call them in any way. And then based on that, to set up some objectives or goals. It's a matter of terminology, as I said before, and then going into the action part. Good. Another thing that I was to highlight here was that we have maybe different layers of strategy inside of open source or any other initiative. It's a long-term strategy, which actually is the mission and vision and values. The hands-on strategy that is more actionable, represented by the strategic areas, and an operational strategy. Another thing that I want to highlight here is that the uncertainty, the time frame, the scope, and the size, all of them decrease when we move from the bottom to top, from the long-term strategy to operational strategy. Some examples. Everything is more detailed in the long document that I shared. Here it's a kind of, let's say, seed of an ontology. Maybe this could evolve in an ontology if you find any value in having a real ontology. So on the top is the long-term strategy with the core elements, mission, vision, value, and then hands-on strategy. Here with the strategic pillars or strategic areas that are depicted from the long-term strategy. Objectives or goals are coming from the strategic pillars. I'm putting a big emphasis here because I think that starting in this way will help us to not having at the end some objective-like items that are more actually actions. A North Star, if you find any value in having a North Star. I saw the comments coming from Michael regarding the North Star metric that was defined. I totally agree. Again, this is the content, and as I said, I'm too fresh here to be able to define real content inside of the strategy. So my let's say the area where I'm very confident now I'm with this model, then when we start to populate the model, my level of confidence decreases a bit. Many other elements here, when we'll have good actions, when we'll have with everything that it's big, then we can spend some time, for example, in defining what means a scoring or a prioritization framework, how we are going to decide what is important from the parking lot, how we are going to extract from the, let's say, from the backlog and put into the action, how the validation system works. So we have a validation, okay, but we need a template to be able to create a test case or for a validation, identifying the hypothesis, assumptions, risks, assigning a owner to the risk, if it's the case. I don't want to overcomplicate the things, but this is a kind of best practice. Then now we are stepping inside of the content. So these descriptions that you see for the mission and vision, they are extracted from the documents that we had on hand, but also we try to formulate them in a simple way. For example, for the mission, we reformulated like, we open Cardano to the world. We support and encourage global citizens to shape the future of blockchain technology. The same for the vision. We have something that it's a bit more easily to be understood. Now, the values, these values are extracted from the documents. Michael, I saw your comment. I know there are several other values, but still this number of values should somehow not a big number. If we are going to insert, I don't know, 7, 8 values, I'm not sure if they are not going to dilute a bit. Just an opinion. Strategic areas. For each element, I have set some axioms, what is important for that element. For example, here for the strategic areas, the strategic alignment, what I said before, that the strategic areas emerge from the long-term strategy, and the phase alignment, because all the time the areas are more or less are actually very well aligned with the phase of development where we are. So a strategic area that it's important now, it's present. Otherwise, it's somewhere in a kind of parking lot. on the left side, you have all the like action items or items that I identified in the documentation, like being a good candidate for these strategic areas. In some discussions with Christian and also with Sandip, we had saying that the number should be around 3, 4. So on the right side, you have some proposals that for sure can be amended, or you can decide that something else is more important for the current stage of development and also more aligned with the mission and vision. Now, goals or objectives, again, these two names is still a matter of debate. We are going to set in this terminology that is going to be built. These axioms, again, I will not spend time. Now, the goals, these are only proposals, so I'm not confident at all. I tried to identify something that I was thinking that it's important for Intersect and for open source based on my limited knowledge. But if you think that something else is important, as long as this something else it's aligned with the strategic areas that were defined before. So all the time having this approach of defining the big thing and then nailing down. So these are the goals. And then with the goals, for sure, we need to have metrics. Again, the metrics that I proposed, they are aligned with the goals, and the goals are aligned with the strategic areas. So a North Star metric that our proposal was community engagement rate. I understood that it's not a good proposal. Okay, we can discuss something else. And these other metrics that you see here that are connected and emerging from the goals. So if we change the goals, for sure the metrics will be changed. So they are here only because we have that goals. Also some action items with these axioms, important again, alignment, ownership, a good understanding about the levels of granularity, what is big, what is smaller. I'm a huge fan of having all the time DOR and DOD. Most of the time that they are forgotten tooling system to manage them and track them. I know that we have these ClickUp backlogs, and these are some proposals because we have that goals. So these action items actually is the way that these goals are going to be driven to success and measured by the metrics. So if the goals are going to be changed, we will have other action items. From what I understood, some of these action items are in progress or even done. But again, it's a place where my level of confidence is quite low. This is the roadmap, and I think that's all. If someone have risen the hand, sorry, I had in my front, on my screen only the presentation, and I haven't seen any hand.
Just to briefly jump in and clarify too. So the intention of this draft was mostly to establish the framework, and then we intentionally left some controversial content for the proposal so we can spark some engagement, because it's easier to get complaints than contributions sometimes. So we want to, for the month of March, the first 2 weeks, I think we need to align the committee on what the mission, vision, values are, and then the strategic pillars and the objectives, and then the last 2 weeks work out the operational strategy associated to that. And then hopefully by the 29th, we have something that's actionable, and then we can test it over 2 months and then come back to it and see via the pilot if it actually is working or if we need to change quite a bit. So any questions? I think I owe Bogdan a bottle of whiskey after that in-depth work. So
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, good. So again, what you have seen on the screen, it's only very short deck based on the content that you will find in the big document.
Yeah, it seems like we should probably try and discuss on the document so as to Void to take it, and then once people have had a chance to do that, we can discuss it and then commit in the meeting if we need to, I guess.
What we can do is, Michael, with you and Nick, we can review comments and focus key areas we want to discuss for each committee meeting. And I think mostly the month of March, our agenda is just going to be talking strategy. We can bring up some 10-minute items here and there if they're a priority. But I think getting this out the door is our biggest scope item. And we already have the Google Doc available to anyone. We just got to put in a GitHub PR too, so that way we target both audiences. And I think I'll get the Marcoms out to get participation sparked. Okay. The next item was moderation policy. I think you already talked about that, right, Michael?
I already talked about that, and hopefully I'm gonna get some learn, and then we can use that.
Okay. Well then, I wanted to bring up how we actually go about testing the strategy in the pilot. I'll just keep it to the high-level bullet points. I think this is not the deck that has that effectively. Let me go to the 2024 roadmap. So generally thinking about how we test the strategy, add 14 high-level areas of where we potentially could test it to, and I'll link the deck to here. I just wanted to get what's a priority thing based on what we put in the strategy. Do we actually want to use as this is our metrics that we accounted for during the 2-month pilot, therefore the strategy is good, or we get a confidence level where we need to reiterate. But high level, it's limited contributor engagement, inefficient code contribution, unclear decision making, lack of diversity, community channel and effectiveness, bug bounty, documentation fragmentation, and it builds on from there. And in the other doc, which I'll link, we actually Gheorge helped me do a given then when to help put it in that use case into your mind of a situation where that may come up. And we won't be able to test for everything. So that's where we need to do kind of a prioritization ranking for it. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to, in some ways, like that those things you brought up there were interesting because I think in some ways one lens on this that might be helpful would be to say, well, what are our biggest problems, right? What do we think is actually wrong with the current situation? And then we can maybe think about how to address that and maybe try and measure the wrongness and hope it goes down over time. And I thought it was interesting that I noticed the things you flashed up very briefly there were phrased negatively, which in some ways is interesting because then that makes your mind think. You can look at it and go, well, is this actually a problem? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to phrase it that way because it does make you. It sparks an actual situation you may have seen. And you're like, oh, maybe that is an issue.
Yeah, but in particular, I think we want to be careful not to focus on things that aren't problems or not big problems. Yeah,
completely. And to help us actually measure that, I've worked with. We should begin an instance of Grimoire Labs set up for us over the next week. So that way we can help actually monitor some of these metrics as well with what we want to test against. That's the this tool I tried to set up on my own, but I'm actually going to work with them to get a managed instance so we can configure it to our needs. But this is one of the standards. Like one of my favorite things is we talked about how we had the more higher developer activity than Ethereum in one of our posts, but it didn't get into whether that was actually wholesale IOG or if it was actually other developers as well. And at least this shows different domains by which contributions were made to overall Cardano. So this will be more broken out. This is a really bad instance I put on my own laptop because I don't know how to work the config file correctly. So time to go to the experts.
Is that something that can be made public as well, or is it a per seat license thing? Okay, cool.
That's
nice.
We can host up to 100 repos before we start having to get into a specialized contract. But yeah,
there's a lot of data there.
Yeah, and we need to tailor. That's where they can help us get to the dashboards of what we actually want to see. So that way we can filter the data. Because I think just by what I have already downloaded, there's 99 pages of 20 results of different kinds of filters. So, and that's just from Git. Okay. I'll go to open forum. Oh, Sandip, sorry, I forgot your hand.
Yeah. No, there's earlier testing the strategy. I wasn't that clear about it. What's the metric for measurement whether it's a success or not?
So our initial draft is what we're gonna think this is what Cardano should be in open source, and then we're gonna put those operational pieces into effect, and then come up with what we think are metrics to grade that operational success, and then tailor our strategy if things end up being a failure. Worst case example, if we start trying to do the open source strategy and we're still in the same state as when we started, we know we failed in some aspect. So
it should also in some way also link to the North Star metric that we would select. Everything should be contributing in some way to that.
Yeah, when Bogdan proposed it, I thought instead of choosing like one metric, which potentially could turn into a vanity metric, we actually make it like a graded average of multiple metrics that develop this maturity score or whatever we want it to be. And that's what we can go to prove that we're on a better track record. With the limited data I had at IOG, I did a just general data poll merges based on some expert advice with documentation. And I think we averaged a C when I put letter grades to it, with most projects being a D, and I think we had one A on that letter grade scale. So it definitely needed to be refined because that was a very biased metric. It wasn't anything based on actual success. I think it was Daniel, then Adam, then Salona.
Hi. Oh, thank you. Christian, so you mentioned the strategy has, and from the presentation that I saw, it has metrics that we measure the open source plan. Is there a due date for when we review back?
Yeah, so we'll have, the goal is end of March, have everything drafted, and then we enact it in April. And then towards the end of May, we'll do another month of remediation or however long we decide we need to review the strategy, make updates, and then do another pilot. It'll be a continuous improvement cycle.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
And another question for the where you're hosting that open source repos. Is that list public? And if so, where is it? And can we get some community feedback from what is included and what not might be included? Because I feel like open source goes in parallel to decentralization, and decentralization we want to be not linear but exponential. So there's going to be an exponential amount of things that might not make it into what is considered still under the Cardano umbrella, but not official.
Well, I know the strategy will at least test it with the projects under the Intersect umbrella specifically, just to test its viability. But we can assess this to wider areas as well on how we engage as one way of doing it. There's a lot to be determined through this.
Okay, thank you.
Adam?
Yeah, just real quick, because I know we're coming up at the top of the hour. You know, I haven't been doing open source software and a lot of these other things as long as you guys have, but I have worked in factories and needed to get my workers to be OSHA compliant and reduce our incident rates. So because in a decentralized ecosystem, we kind of lack punitive tools because, like, if somebody gets mad, they'll just leave and stop contributing. So just something to think about is actually figuring out how we build a culture of acknowledging and rewarding the positive steps that people are taking to make them more likely to repeat those steps rather than figuring out like, oh, you're bad, therefore you don't get a grant sort of thing. Because it actually makes people want to do better, especially if they get just a little kudos from their peers on a regular basis. Like, oh, you made 3 commits this month, like, here's a clap for you sort of thing. And so I think there's a way there that we can actually like foster a very good and healthy ecosystem by taking some of those learnings. And again, I'm thinking about them originally from a OSHA safety metrics perspective and improving that and getting people to wear their safety goggles and their earplugs. But if we want them to take safe steps to make good open source, we could probably take a lot of learnings from that. So just something that popped in my head and I wanted to get it out there on the record for the time being.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just give it to Salona because I know she's done things like that before.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I was putting some links on some stuff to look at. I've been involved in the chaos community for forever. And they've been trying to work on those health metrics. And I noticed that y'all were using Grimoire, which is like one of the things that there's a huge link up between those two, between that open source project and that community. Like they're constantly sharing. And I know the CEO comes to all of the meetings and speaks at all of them and does a lot of that type of work. Because they're definitely true believers in regards to that. So don't reinvent the wheel. There's stuff. It's right over there. You can go check it out and go, what works for us, what doesn't work for us, which is always the best way of going about doing it. So it's there. So we should probably go and check that out. I think we should blow it up beyond there. And you'll sit there and if you go look, there's a chaos talk from me where I talk about that, where I do talk about, sometimes I get a bit frustrated with chaos because I feel like sometimes the metrics are lazy. Because they're using the convenient ones that GitHub already has, rather than going, what does a larger community look like and what does all that diversity within that community look like? How many of us here are actually core Cardano developers? Not many. Show off. I'm teasing. But you get my point. It takes a lot of diversity to get these things going and have all that kind of stuff. So when doing that, making sure that we do all that, and I think what Adam was saying was really, really important about being volunteer forward, and looking at those nonprofit models, because that's how they do it, right? They don't have punitive, and punitive, by the way, fails badly. I don't understand why I get so many asshole emails from nonprofits going, how dare you not volunteer with us? Daniel Pink and others have shown that does not work. The research is there. Don't do it. And obviously we don't want to be there either. So, totally. And I love the NFTs, by the way, Daniel. I think I was a Girl Scout from Brownie to Cadet Advisor. So me love some badges. But, let's just not make them expensive, I guess. So thanks.
Salona, I actually, Gheorge from Bogdan was going to put me in touch with Diane Mueller on doing storytelling for metrics and stuff like that. Is she a really good resource on that?
I don't know her as well. I know kind of. So a problem with me sometimes, Christian, is I've been around for too long. So often I just know the upper echelon and I don't always know everybody lower down. But I would assume so, because everyone that I've ever met from Bogdan is like really heart driven. And so they're really just like, where are we? What can we do? And a lot of that just kind of speaks from Daniel, who's very much so that way. And Gheorge, they're both like two of the kindest leaders I've ever met. And they're very academia based. And so they're very much in that space. So I would assume that they are.
Okay, perfect. Because I know she's from, me and Gheorge met over barbecue in Austin, which is the best way to bond with anybody. So he was saying she's from Red Hat, and turns out she's cybersecurity from my wife's side of the world. So,
oh wow,
yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
It might be a cool connection.
Oh no, totally, yeah. And Gheorge, I adore Gheorge. He's just he did a lot of stuff for IEEE SA Open. He's a beautiful person, and you want to know another person who knows the best of how to do open source is Gheorge. All of his meetings are fun and engaging, and you want to come to them and you just want to be there, even though it's a meeting, because he's a beautiful person.
Yeah.
I don't say that,
Completely
by the way. I'm kind of a grumpy bitch.
Okay. I know we're 3 over. Any more comments, or we'll conclude, post the meeting minutes, and then at this week's homework, read everything, get mad about it, and suggest why it should be better. So.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Christian.
Yep.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I have to go check.